stamped out the last of the dinosaurs when I started. All right, I want to start with something that I wasn't expecting. I want to introduce you to... See who this is? Fabio Ribeiro. The 2015 winner of the Herman Pines Award from the Catalysis Club of Chicago. As I will tell you a few times along the way, and I hope my voice holds out, people are important, and that's one of the special ones. Okay. It's an honor for me to be here. I had this honor in September of 2011. So some of you who are long enough in the tooth at Purdue may remember it's actually some of the slides I'm going to show you and some of the stories I told them. But we'll see whether there's anything new for you. Let me tell you what I have in mind here. I want to tell you a little bit about me, about what drives me, and particularly in that context, why I've made some of the choices that I made. And I guess what I'm thinking is that that might give you some context and comparison for decisions that you're going to be making. You should bear in mind, though, that the evolution of a career is time-dependent, dependent on the moment in time when things converge for you, and dependent on the times, which are the environment that you happen to be in. My opportunities will not be your opportunities. The days when you got 12 interviews and when you got all sorts of things that I was privy to, I'm not sure they're coming back, okay? The game is different. But what's still the same is that opportunity is there. And your job is to try to recognize it, and what's going to determine what happens for you is how you respond to how you can, what your ability is to recognize those opportunities and how you respond. Okay? So I'm going to show you a few slides in the beginning to sort of set the stage about me, and then I'm going to talk about what I have found to be some of the truths in the business of research that I've been in over those 50 years. And along the way, I'm going to throw in some particular aspects of my career development that were sort of decision points, and talk a little bit about how I made decisions and why I made them. The agenda is very loose, though. I mean, I have a bunch of things that I'd like to say, none of which are really that important to say. So I'm really more interested in what interests you than what interests me. So I want you to ask questions along the way if you have questions. And if we get off on a tangent, that's perfectly fine. If I feel like we've gone too far, don't worry, I'll let you know. Don't wait till the end. Let's do that. I guess what I'm hoping out of all of this is that I forgot. Fabio probably can't hear a word I'm saying. What I'm hoping from all this is that by looking at this evolution and talking about it and responding to questions that you might have, some of my experience might prove useful to you, and as you do your career development. That's my objective. So be sure to ask questions along those lines. All right. So let's start the slide part. You all know where this truth and beauty thing came from at the beginning? How many do? Somebody just made it up, that's it? I'm astonished. Okay, 1820. All right. I shape fair attitude with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought with forest branches and the trodden weed. Thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in the midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth and truth is beauty. That's all you need to know on earth. That is all you know on earth, and all you need to know. Okay? So this is a famous poem by Yeats, or Keats, I mean, sorry. And for me, the truth is about the truth in science. And so what I'm after is the search for scientific truth. But a point I want to make, I'll start with a diversion. There'll be lots of these. It's interesting to me to look at these words and think about what they mean to me. And if I steer you in this direction of scientific truth and discovering truth is what we're all about, and that's what a career is, and that the beauty is actually getting there, I could probably get some subscribers to that. And that's true. And that's true for me, and it's true for some of you. But this poem inspired a lot of people in a lot of different directions, and there are many truths. There's not just one truth. Okay? And in fact, I guess what I would say is usually I don't write this stuff down, but I wrote a few things down this time. It's a disadvantage, actually. Okay. Yeah. So here's my point. I think that we are really good at training. I think that all of you in this room will enter your careers very well trained to do what you want to do. I'm a lot less sanguine about whether you're educated or not. Education is an entirely different business. Education is more about being prepared for life and getting the most out of life. And to Fabio in particular, it might come as a shock that there's more to life than scientific truth. Maybe than some of you. But I would hold that there is, okay? I'm going to have to go ahead. Oh, yeah, that's where I am. Okay. And that it's a worthwhile endeavor to try to expand your truth set. And in fact, maybe that's what education is all about, to expose you to the truth set. So I would claim that the fullness of life that you lead depends on the richness of the truth set that you sample. Now, some of you may have heard this rumor. There is literature, poetry, dance, music, drama, history, even politics outside of these walls. It's shocking, I know. Education is a lifelong process. If you're not there yet, don't worry, there's plenty of time, but it never stops. I mean, just a little piece about me. When I was a graduate student at Stanford, one of the most interesting things I did, and the things that will last me my lifetime, is I was feeling a little bit one-sided, so I audited a course in art history at Stanford, taught by a woman. I think she was an assistant professor at the time, who was extraordinary. And there was a book that had, all the great paintings in the world and discussion about all of that. She had her own photographs of almost every one of them. She traveled the world, she knew all this stuff, and she painted a picture about art, and in particular art and its relationship to culture and science. I mean, if you go around Europe and you look at the statues that honor people. Some statues will be a man on a horse. There's not going to be a lot of women, I'm sorry. We learned that late. The man on a horse, the horse has all 4 feet on the ground. Then there'll be a man on a horse with one horse has 1 foot up. Then there'll be a man on a horse, the horse is reared up like that. Why is that? They learned how to cast strong materials. Art and science are related. All right, that's enough for that diversion. Now we'll go back to what I'm supposed to be doing there. Here's part of it. So when I talk about scientific truth, I'm talking about scientific truth in kinetics and catalysis. My view may be a little narrower than your view, or your view may be entirely different, but we all have a view. So this is my view. And one of the things that got me interested in this is there's this box that we call a reactor, and things go in and things go out. And if you put some fairy dust inside, the things that come out are different than they were when you didn't have any fairy dust. What's intriguing to me is if you can't look in the box, how do you know what's going on? And there's some of the questions that we ask where we can't look in the box. So what we have to do is you have to do what amounts to kind of stimulus response experiments. Put something in and you change something, or you make a step change, or you change something, and then you see how what comes out changes, and then you try to put together a model to make that work. To me, this was like a mystery story. It was like, who done it? And I wanted to know more about that. I was really intrigued by that. And my first introduction to this material was very unusual. Again, an experience you will never have. There was a book by Haugen and Watson. That was K.M. Watson at Wisconsin. That was one of the early kinetics books in chemical engineering. There was a Watson on the faculty of Wisconsin when I was there for a semester. It was C.C. Watson, not to be confused with K.M. Watson. But he had an interesting view about teaching. We used the first book by Levenspiel, which has the Battle of Trafalgar problem in it. If you've never seen that, it's the best problem ever written about kinetics. And I got so interested in the material, I kept, I would read stuff, I would do extra problems, I would take him up and ask him what's going on and all that. And finally he said, look, so I can see that you really love this stuff. He said, you do whatever you want. You just dive into this book and do whatever you want. And if somehow you miss what was on the exam, we'll take care of that. So he gave me free range. And it was wonderful. I agreed. I worked probably all the problems in the book, and that was what got me hooked on kinetics. Okay. Now there is this problem though. You really would like to know what's going on in the box. So if you want to know what's going on in the box, you got to, whoops, oh no, sorry, one more thing. I wanted to give you an idea of the level that I want to understand what my friend Gary Haller calls the dance of the molecules. The kinetics problem, or in a catalysis problem, there are two parts to it. There's what the molecules are doing to go from what I can afford to what I can sell for a lot of money, and only that, and I want to know the pathway to get there. Okay? And so I want you to understand what is the level that I'd like to know that. Let me see if I can get this started over. So this is ethane, and that's the dehydrogenation of ethane to form ethylene. You notice anything peculiar about that? I'll play it for you one more time. There goes one hydrogen. There goes another hydrogen. Then they joined up. Why did it do that? Why didn't the two hydrogens just say, bye, I'm leaving, and head out the straight out the door? They did. They went out the side door. Why did they do that? Some of you really guys should know the answer. There are rules about how molecules interact that have to do with the symmetry of their orbitals. They're called the Woodward Heartland rules, for which a Nobel Prize was given. Okay. And what they say is that the reaction is governed by the symmetry overlap. If you don't have the right overlap of orbitals, you can't transfer electrons. And if the symmetry is wrong, there's no overlap, there's no transfer. All right? Turns out that the addition of hydrogen to ethylene is symmetry forbidden, because the orbitals don't overlap properly. Okay? And so to get the right electron transfer, you don't have a pathway. So that means by microscopic reversibility that you can't have dehydrogenation follow that path because you can't have hydrogenation follow that path. So what we know from that, that observation is a DFT calculation, which we know to be the truth, within 2 kilocalories. That shows exactly what the Woodward-Hoffman's rules predict, that the reaction can't go by direct loss, so it has to go one at a time. And actually on a catalyst, when you want to do that, that's pretty much the way you do it too. You can't hydrogens one at a time. very rarely get interactions to it. So that's what I want. Not just what reacts with what. I want to know where it is, how it interacts with the surface, exactly what shape it has, what its orbitals look like, and why those orbitals overlap with whatever else they overlap with to make the reaction go the way it goes. I want to know the details down to the electronic level. And for me, what is, diversion again. Time do I have to stop? 8:30? Oh, shit, I lost my train. Yeah.
What does L stand for? Leaf?
Yes. This is a video made by Leaf Delgass, who is a consummate consumer programmer and interested in computer visualization. Yogesh Joshi was a graduate student here doing the calculations. Let's see, I lost my train. All right, I can make it move this way. So, oh yes. The worst thing that you can say about a field is that it's mature. If you're a program manager and the reviewers write back, this is a mature field, what that means is everything that's interesting has already been done. Don't give these guys a cent. And for a while, it was looking like Catalysis was becoming a mature field. And the reason that Catalysis is not a mature field by a long shot, and the reason why to my way of thinking, why Catalysis now is a vibrant field with huge opportunities for solving some of the most greatest problems, is because of theory. We can, I mean, it's not only theory, of course, and I'm not such a believer in theory that I'm not going to do the experiments. I don't trust those guys that much. But I do trust them to help me prioritize the experiments that I want to do. I do trust them to give me ideas about what, in addition to what I thought of myself, might be an even better idea of what a new catalyst or a new understanding would be. And it gives me a way, I'm used to gathering experimental data and looking at the data and having it talk to me and trying from that to piece out this picture of where the molecules are and how they interact. And I can start to formulate that from good experiments. But now I can test that. I can go to my theory friends and I can say, this is the way I think the reaction works. And they do their magic and they say, no way. Activation barrier is 100 kilocalories, never going to happen. Go back and think of a new idea. And this is extremely important in being able to develop things. So what's new since I started is theory. I mean, I like math. And one of my disappointments was there was no need for math because there was no theory. There was nothing. When the Nobel laureate that won the prize for superconductivity decided he'd try his hand at adsorption. He tried to do hydrogen adsorption on tungsten. Couldn't get the sign right of heat absorption, much less the pattern. Things have changed a lot. All right. Okay, so now let's go look in the box. So if you want to look in the box, somehow you've got to get inside the box. The way to get inside the box is often with some kind of energy. Photons are good. And so what we do now is we shine photons through the box, ideally when the reaction is working. But you don't always get away with that. And then by looking at the spectroscopy of or the interaction of the energy with vibrators or electron emissions or whatever might be going on the materials that are in there, then we get information that can help us identify what the elements are, what the chemical state is, what the surface composition is versus the bulk composition, and where things are adsorbed, and learn all kinds of details about what physically is going on the surface. And that information, combined with what we can do with our theory friends, it helps us paint a picture of what's going on. And that's sort of what we're trying to do. And that's what's driven my career and provided me with a kind of beauty that comes from that understanding that I found very satisfying in my career. Okay. So let me tell you how it actually got there. I remember very clearly. During the same time that I was all turned on by kinetics at Wisconsin, I can remember walking down the street one day. I was a junior, and I was saying to myself, you know, I mean, it was a foregone conclusion. I was going to graduate school for the day I was born, I'm sure. And so I'm thinking to myself, you know, I'm going to have to decide what I want to do. Chemical engineers, we know, can do anything. So you have to make a choice. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, I really like kinetics. So kinetics has got to be part of it. That's a given. And then I was also taking a course on polymer properties and how the polymer properties were related to the solid state. And I was really intrigued by that notion that you could learn enough about the properties of solids to make predictions about what they could do. And so solid state and kinetics, it was easy. That's catalysis. Even I knew that at that time. And so then the next thing I did is I went around to everybody I could talk to in the department. I talked to probably 3 or 4 faculty members. And I said, I think I want to do catalysis for my Ph.D. research. Where should I go? Or who should I work with? And they all mentioned the same name, Michel Woodward. He was the top of the heap at the time. And so I said, okay. I was lucky enough to get an MSF fellowship, and I was all set to go. At that time, Woodward was at Berkeley. So I was all ready to go, and my summer job that summer, I was also fortunate that I had a different summer job every year. I'll come back to that, talk a little bit about those later at this time. But that summer I was at the Humble Oil Company in Baytown, Texas. And while I was there, what I heard was, guess what? Michelle's not at Berkeley anymore, moved to Stanford. So I'm thinking, gee, I've been at Michigan, I've been at Wisconsin, I've been at University of Connecticut. I really like big universities with lots of choices. And Stanford is this little place that's got 9 faculty members, something like that. I don't think I want to do it. I think I'll get a master's degree and decide whether I'm still burning up with catalysis. And if I am, I'll move. Well, again, here comes the part where serendipity, and you just never know how the stars are going to align in your career. Turned out Woodward was a long-time consultant of Exxon at the time, and the Humble Oil Company was a subsidiary. And guess what? He was coming to consult that summer. So they gave me an hour of his consulting time. I don't know, who knows how much that was. I've got to tell you another aside. When Michelle came to visit the first time there, one of the junior guys took him out to dinner, and they went to a beautiful restaurant in Houston called Portofino's, which has a big wine selection place. But you go and you look at the wines and everything, but there are no prices. Michelle was a real wine connoisseur, so they took him there. He went around. He said, "Oh, we're going to like this one." So they had this bottle of wine, and when the guy turned in the expense report, remember this is back in the 50s, the wine was $27. The dinner and the tip and everything else was probably $20. So the next time he came, the director of the center took him out. They were going to waste a $27 bottle of wine on some low-level guy. Anyway, that's the way. So I had this conversation with Woodward, and maybe it's only half an hour. I walked out saying, okay, I'm going to Stanford. I was very lucky at the time because I had gotten that NSF fellowship, and so I called up Stanford. This is August. Okay? I called up Stanford, and the head of the department was Andy Acrobos. Some of you may know him. He's sort of infamous. And I said, I have an NSF fellowship, and I'm interested in coming to Stanford. And then he said, sure, come ahead. So I did. And when they did, and I figured since I had my own money, I could do what I wanted. So we had this thing, you go talk to the faculty and you put your things down. So I put Boudar. And Andy called me into his office and he said, "You sure you don't want to do fluid mechanics?"
Yeah.
So he came. Now, you should understand though, I still can't believe this. The stipend for an NSF fellowship was $2,400 a year. Okay, this was 1964. And that was about a third less than everybody else was getting, because they all had to, anybody who didn't have one of these fellowships. If you had a special fellowship, you got the privilege of making less money. But you got the privilege of doing what you want. Michelle. So, anyway, it worked out. I did TA, I didn't have a TA assignment, but my friend Al Van Ice was a TA with Woodward, and I helped out. I just joined him to do that, just so I could learn a little bit about how that worked. I'll talk a little bit about teaching later on, maybe. Okay, so that's enough for that. Okay, so let me tell you a few of the things that I learned in graduate school. I think it could well be the most important thing that I learned at Stanford in that environment. And it is that in this search for truth, the search for truth is absolute. And in any environment where you are, if somebody tells an untruth that you know is an untruth, or you suspect is an untruth, then it's your responsibility to challenge that. Okay? I mean, that's how the game works. However, it is also your responsibility to be sure that you challenge the issue, the truth, not the person. And it's amazing. And I was editor of the journal Catalysis for 4 years, and I adjudicated many disagreements among colleagues. And there certainly were colleagues out there who didn't understand that separation. The paper had to be wrong because of the author. This is everything that's wrong with the author, and not very much about what was wrong with the paper. This is not allowed. But what happened at Stanford was very interesting, and Michel really was very well known and very well respected worldwide. And because he was a Belgian, and because he had a lot of ties to Europe and traveled back and forth, he knew a lot of people all over the place. And so when anybody came from outside the U.S., they almost all, the Catalysis people, they all stopped, they arranged their travel to go through San Francisco. And so, as a graduate student, I bet if there were at that time 300 active researchers in heterogeneous catalysis worldwide, I bet you I met 150 of them. And I was probably on first name basis with at least 50 of them. These are people from all over the place. And Woodward was so busy and the traffic was so heavy that we got a lot of face time with those guys. And they would come and, you know, if it didn't matter whether it was Herr Professor so-and-so or whether, you know, who it was and what their credentials were. We had seminars in the evening. I can't remember what day of the week. I don't think it was Saturday night, but I think it was an evening. They had a gazebo where it was our seminar place. And when somebody stood up there in front of the group with a piece of chalk and maybe those big lantern slides, then this was about truth and not about reputation. If somebody said something, you know, everybody, not just the professors, the students, everybody, there was something that looked wrong, you challenged it. And you know, that's what I encourage all of you in all the group meetings that we have, especially in the Catalysis area, the Wednesday group meeting. When you're the person in front, you should be counting on the people in the audience to hold your feet to the fire. To be sure that everything you say really is the truth, and that there's a little bit of untruth. We need to expose that so that we can be sure that we understand what the truth is. It's very important. Just remember to keep your eye on the issue first. And that has been important for me my entire career. It's about the way you deal with people, and you know, this is a competitive business sometimes. And people do fight for their ideas, and that's fine, you should. Even if you're wrong, you should fight for the idea until you're convinced that you're wrong. But people should the individual shouldn't play in that. There's another piece of this because it came out of my experience, and that is in the Woodward group, when I was there were 14 students. And he traveled a lot. I mean, he traveled more than anybody in this faculty, even though some of them travel a lot too. He was gone a lot. And the interesting thing was that he was not an experimentalist. I'm not sure that he could do an experiment. I know he couldn't have done any of the experiments that were going on in our lab. Now, you may wonder how he built such a good lab. He built such a good lab because of Jack Benson, who was a friend of his and a colleague who worked at Philly Dickinson College. And Jack came and spent every summer at Stanford. And Jack taught the students how to blow glass and how to build an apparatus that you can do chemical absorption with and measure surface areas. Virtually all the instrumentation that was in the lab was built by Jack, or was built under Jack's direction. But Woodward had a mind for how things fit together. What I'm going to tell you is the mosaic of how the physical world is connected. And his mosaic was very precise. He was very good at detecting catalytic BS. And so even if you didn't know how to do your experiment, he could tell whether your result was wrong. And that was an extraordinary gift. That what made him such an important player in the field. But in that environment, one thing happened that was very important for the people who survived it. It was sink or swim. Here's your problem, go do it. Come and tell me when there's something interesting. And you know, oh, the light doesn't go on when you turn the switch, or you know, you think you might be calibrated wrong or something. Don't bother me with that. I don't care about that. That's your problem. So when you got done, it wasn't a question of, gosh, did I really do this or not? Am I sitting here because somebody told me what to do, or am I sitting here because I did it? That's a very important feeling to have when you go off on your own. So I would say it this way. I've got a lot of stories that are sort of cracked up here, so I have to see if I can piece them together. That kind of sink or swim environment is maybe not completely ideal. Because even for the swimmers, it's not as efficient as it could be. When you first come into an environment, in spite of how smart you guys are and how much you know, you don't know anything. Compared to what you need to know, what you're going to know when you leave. So everybody's a blank slate when you start. And the question is, how do you get up to speed? What's the best way to get up to speed? Now you can get up to speed by trial and error, and that works, and in the sink or swim method that works fine. But maybe there's a responsibility of the advisor to help you out when you're so dumb, until you get smart enough that you can make better decisions on your own. Okay? And you know, we spent a lot of time after we left Stanford talking about pros and cons of our experience, and one of the things that I concluded was that was part of the advisor responsibility, is to help students get a good start. But I would also maintain, and I think this is sort of out of our control in a sense, every Ph.D. of value will have a moment when you're really in the dark, nobody can help you, you know that if you can't solve what's in front of you, you're not going to graduate. And you've asked everybody that you can think of to help you, and it's not because they don't want to help you, they don't know either. That transition from that dark moment to when you actually solve the problem, that's what you take away. That's what gives you the confidence to say, I did it once, give me a new problem, I can do it again. I think that's very important. I think that if your problem is pre-masticated and you know, stand here and turn these knobs, let's look at the numbers, let's write the paper, okay, you're done. it doesn't prepare you for what you're supposed to be doing when you leave on your own. So I can honestly say that I have never engineered a situation like that because I thought it was important for the student. These situations come on their own accord. Problems we work on are hard, and it's not uncommon that we don't know the answer. Now remember, it may be that the barrier in front of you is immutable. So the solution is not to try to find a bigger hammer, the solution is to try to find a way around. And that what you thought you could do, you can't do, but you can get to the other side by another path. That's a solution to the problem. But part of this evolution from being a beginning student to being a PhD is solving at least one of those really tough problems, basically on your own. The key idea came from you, because that's what you're going to take to the bank. All right, this is a theme I want to continue on with. To get from where you are to where you're going to go next, whether it's academia or industry, it seems to me that the most important piece is confidence. What I think many of you who don't feel yet are lacking, and what I think happens to some people as they start making decisions about how far they're going to reach and how far they're going to go, it comes back to a feeling of how confident am I that I can actually do it. And part of the problem is that you're living in a very tough environment because the people that have been here a long time, the ones with no hair or long hair or gray hair or whatever, they've done this a lot. And they've been in your situation before, and they've seen lots of other people in your situation, and so they've seen these problems evolve, and experience builds a level of confidence because even if you aren't successful in the first few tries, you will eventually be successful in something, and those successes build on each other, and you've got those successes to draw on. So when you go to say to yourself, can I do this? You can say, well, hey, look what I did before. I did it before, I can do it again. But you don't have that. You just learn it. You barely know whether to believe what people are telling you is the truth, much less being able to discover for yourself that's the truth. So that's the hard part. And in a sense, there's nothing you can do about that because you don't have the experience yet. You have to make a leap of faith, essentially. Okay? I think it's a Yiddish word. The word that I think describes this the best is you need a certain amount of chutzpah. I don't know whether you all understand what that word is, but it's confidence on overdrive, short of arrogance. Arrogance is very hard to sell. I tolerate arrogance only in people for whom I have enormous respect for their intellect, because the arrogance rubs me the wrong way. Okay, but you have to have a certain kind of confidence, and maybe it's more true for an academic situation because you have more independence, and in some ways a less nurturing environment, although not necessarily. But I think it's true in industry too, that having the confidence that your ideas are going to be valuable is a very important aid in moving forward at the next step and being successful at the next step. So how do you get that? Well, you get that by working hard, and you hope as you move through your PhD career that you're having some successes, and you can look back on those successes and draw on them and say, hey, I did it before, I can do it again. But I think one of the things, especially for academic preparation, but maybe across the board, you need to read more. You need to broaden your scope. Many of you, all of you, have very narrowly defined problems. In 4 years, you can't dig a deep enough hole to get to bedrock on a big problem. You have a problem that's well defined so you can understand all aspects and understand what the solution to a problem really means. That's important. But and in the environment we live in now, I think many of you are probably pretty well versed about why your little piece of the action is important. Certainly why your little piece of the action is important to the next bigger part of the puzzle. Okay, I mean is in the proposal that's funding your work. It's in the talks that you give, especially to sponsors and things like that. We do a good job at that. But whether you have a picture, and even in a field as narrow as catalysis, how this particular problem, why this little piece that led you to do that, is something important in the whole structure. That, I think, most of you don't get unless you go after it yourself. We don't push you on that probably as hard as we should, but, time is limited and all that. But the more you can spend time broadening your horizons, understanding your whole field, then if you're going to be an academic, the hardest thing about being an academic, especially at the beginning, is choosing a problem worth working on. And how do you know if a problem is worth working on if you don't know what the scope of problems are that are out there, and you don't know what the field is doing and where it's going, and what would make the field go ahead faster? You can't assimilate all of that at your current batch, but you can assimilate a lot more than you do probably. And that breadth is what will help you decide what's a problem worth working and convince the reviewers of your proposal that that problem indeed is worth working on. And then, of course, once you define that, set it in context and say why it's important, then the narrower tool set and the things that are closer to what you really know the most will come into play, and you can say, okay, now that I've convinced you that this has to be done and nobody's done it before, and I have a new approach, this is why my new approach is going to work. That's the part that you know how to do. But the part you don't know how to do is to figure out what that focus should be at the beginning. That's the hardest part. And it's hard because you don't have experience, and you can't fix the experience part, but you can fix the breadth part by trying to read more. This has all kinds of implications. A DuPont reviewer once revealed to me that one of the questions that he asked potential employees was, does your advisor go to seminars? Why do you think he asked that? An advisor who goes to seminars has opened vista, picking up information from everywhere. And so this is a person who's interested in new ideas, who knows how to assimilate new things. Okay? And like it or not, students often tend to emulate their advisors. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but they do. And so if your advisor is somebody who seems interested in new ideas, and maybe you're somebody who's interested in new ideas, and that's what I want. I want somebody in my company who's not going to keep doing what we did, but bring new stuff. Okay? So when I was teaching, my mantra, which some of you heard over and over again, is that the objective of a life's career is to build a mosaic of the connections of the physical world. So, in your own field, you do that sort of automatically. What does that mean? It means that when you see that the hydrogen goes off asymmetrically, you're trying to fit that in your mosaic. Here's a piece of evidence, and what do I know about the chemical world, and why would that happen? And if there's nothing in your entire memory bank about what you know about the physical world that will explain that, then you have to do something about that. And when you're listening to a seminar that's not on your subject, but there are pieces people are talking, you're a catalyst guy, let's say it's about materials, and people are talking about electronic structure and various things that materials do, that's all going up there. That's another tile in your mosaic. You'd be amazed when these things come back to you. Okay? And so, and the other thing is that when you're working on solving problems, one of the things that I see is that at the beginning especially, students tend to be too easily satisfied. You look at the data and and you think, you get an idea, and you try that, and it doesn't work, and you get another idea, and you try that, and it works pretty well, and you say, ah, now I know. And the game is not that easy. Because in the end, every piece of the data, every little wiggle, every little change in energy has to work against your mosaic. Got to be able to explain why every detail works. It's only then that you really understand what's going on. And time and again, the differentiation between something that's ordinary and something that's extraordinary is not in the obvious. It's in those little things. That one piece that didn't actually work. That, you know, I thought I had the whole picture, except this was supposed to go up and it went down a little bit. It may turn out that the new explanation that makes everything work may be physically very different. It's not that you were close and had it, it was that the piece that was missing was really critical, but it just didn't show up in the big effects. It showed up only in the little effects. Okay? So there are lots of stories to go with that, but I'm going to let those go by. Let's see what else I got here. Oh yeah. Yeah, I was going to tell you, I'm pretty happy with my own mosaic, pretty much. It's helped me in many situations, and it's helped me dig out those little details in many instances, and so I'm proud of that. But I need to make a confession. I saw Ronke in the hallway one day, years ago. He said, I read this paper, and it probably was something in Science, about these guys in Switzerland that have essentially taken a photograph needle and rubbed it across the surface and gotten atomic resolution. And my answer to that was, check my mosaic. Bullshit, I don't think it works. I was wrong. Scanning tunneling microscopy and a whole series of things that came after that, and you get exquisite atomic resolution from that. Didn't believe it the first time I heard it. Didn't match my mosaic. Didn't reconsider well enough to make that all put together. There's another thing that I think is important. You look at the education process, and I think it works like this. You start into whatever field that you go into, and the first job of an educator is to convince you that you don't know anything. Everything you thought was right is not right. Think back to how you learned a bunch of things. I think there's an awful lot that goes on. You bring what little experience you have coming into a field, and you think, oh well, it's going to do that. So they say, oh no, it doesn't do that at all. A good example would be you take a classical understanding of the laws of nature into small enough dimensions, and surely they don't work. Okay, so if you start in with that, and somebody tells you, well, throw away all that stuff you thought you knew about classical mechanics, quantum mechanics is the only thing that matters. That's, of course, not true, but I think there's that in education. And then eventually we come along and we say over and over again, we say, remember what I told you about this system? That this is how it behaves? Well, that's true except over here. So it's not always, so that was wrong too, and now here's a better way, and then of course now here's a better way. And all of that makes you feel, or I make some students feel like what they thought they had for intuition is wrong and unreliable. And I would say that that's not a good stance to take. I would say that another way of an analog of building your mosaic is tuning your intuition. I'm convinced that if I take an idea, even with calculations and everything to back it up, about a process to Rakesh Agarwal, he will know in the first 60 seconds whether that idea is any good or not. And how does he know that? Because he has a very finely tuned intuition about how processes work. And even though he may not be able to tell you exactly where your violation of the second law is in those first 60 seconds, he'll just know it isn't going to work. And I think you look at people who are successful, you look at people in industry or academia who have been around a while, they all have this sort of sense. As a reviewer, you open up a paper, you read the abstract, and you're either thinking, yeah, this is probably going to be okay, or you're thinking, oh no, this is snake oil. And so don't let educators talk you out of intuition. I think intuition is very important. I think that it is true that a lot of your initial intuition is not well enough refined. And so in the beginning, your intuition is not a good forecaster. We didn't lie to you about that. What we lied to you about is that your intuition didn't have value. Good practitioners in any field, I think, have a sense right away of what's really working and what isn't, and that's a very valuable skill. And of course, as you build your mosaic and your mosaic gets more complicated, so does your intuition. Because that's really what you're doing. You're doing a fast check of what's coming in against your mosaic, and your intuition is telling you whether this is okay or not. I can see by the clock on the wall that I'm not going to get more than halfway through, so let me see what I could draw out here. Tell you, again, things are different, times are different. Let me tell you how I got to Purdue. When I left Stanford, I had a number of choices. We didn't go to Caltech because we didn't want to raise kids that had to wear a gas mask to play outside. We ended up going to Yale, which in hindsight was probably not the best choice. Their chemical engineering department had just lost its accreditation, but it was Yale. But more than that, I wanted to do muscular spectroscopy. They were the only one that would build me a spectrometer in the door. I wanted to walk in the door and do my experiments, and they said okay, and that's why I went there. And I went there because of John Fenn, who later became a Nobel laureate, but he was one of the guys that was a friend of Michelle, and he visited a lot, and I knew him, and I knew that there was somebody at Yale that I could rely on, in spite of what everybody was telling me about the horrors of being an assistant professor in the Ivy League, which were basically all true. One day, the head of the department drew, they had taken all of engineering and put it in one big department, engineering and applied science it was called. And there were, I think, 12 of us. And the head came in and he said, boys, because there were no girls, times are tough out there. We were assistant professors. If you get a good offer, take it. This was the nurturing of assistant professor's guide in 1968 at Yale University. Things have changed a lot. Oh, and yeah, one thing I wanted to say is for those of you who are wondering whether they have the confidence or the ability to make it as an academic, let me assure you that there's more help there than you think. I mean, if you can't come to a feeling of that confidence at the beginning, that's a problem. You need to consider that. But you could start now trying to build that breadth and trying to put yourself in a position where you be more confident of your ideas and how they fit into the context. Okay? But contrary to the story that I just told you about Yale, I mean, even at Yale now, and virtually every place, and I think especially at Purdue, the objective of the department that hires you is for you to be successful. It's expensive to get you going. We interview a lot of people, and we make very careful choices. Once we say we want you to succeed, and we're going to do everything we can to help you. And so there will be support. There will be people to talk to and people to help you out, people to guide you, people to direct you to the kinds of things that are going to help you be successful at the beginning. It's not an easy road, but it's a doable road if it's something that you feel that you want to do. And I would say that if you want to be successful, I mean really successful in industry, and especially if you want to do research and have some level of independence in how you get to guide your own research program, the level of effort and the understanding of how your work fits into the scope of the company, how you are adding value to the company every day, and why you are so valuable to the company that the last person you're going to fire, okay? To build that kind of situation requires the same kind of building of confidence and doing those things. And we have people you can talk to about that, Jeff Miller, for example, about how those things play out in the industrial environment. But I mean, there are definitely differences, but I know that when comparing notes with my friends when we got out of school, most of which went into industry, where they could make real money, and then there were the few of us who went in those days where you couldn't really make real money. But what I decided is there's a principle of conservation of hassle. And there are things you have to do in industry that you don't want to do, but you have to do them anyway. There are things in academia that you may not want to do, but you have to do them to be successful. And it's not clear to me that the balance is really heavily on one side or the other. It's just a question of how you want to optimize things. I really have to stop. I guess I'm going to end with this. When we moved to Purdue, oh yeah, this is another little piece. We'll stop it actually. I came to Purdue with the idea that I was looking for a place to settle. Well, actually the way it happened was we'd been at Yale for 5 years, and my wife looked at me and she said, you know, I'm going back to the Midwest. You want to come? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So in those days, there was no computer. So she wrote to the chambers. We identified universities within 300 miles of Madison, Wisconsin, which is where her sister was. And we wrote to the chambers of commerce to get an idea of what would be a good place to raise kids and live and all that. And Purdue was one of them. And so, what do you do if you want to get a job at Purdue? Well, the ASCHE meeting was in Philadelphia that year. So I got on the plane and went to the ASCHE meeting, wasn't giving a paper or anything. In those days, there was a card catalog where people listed where they were. I found Lowell Koppel, who was the head, pulled out his card, found his phone number in the hotel, called him up. He happened to be in his room. I said, you don't know me, I'm Nick Delgass, but I'm interested in Purdue if you got a few minutes to talk. He said, come on up. So I went up, and he was sitting on the bed, he was playing his guitar. I said, oh, you're playing the guitar. So we played a little guitar, and we talked about jobs. I came out here and had an interview, and here I am. But another point I wanted to make is when you build a career, there are different ways to go about it. One way is you take the opportunity that's the best you have, and you live with that long enough until you get a better opportunity, and you climb the ladder that way. And there are lots of people who do that, and if you're really intent on going as absolutely as high as you can, maybe that's a good way. That wasn't what I had in mind. One of the reasons I went to academia instead of industry is I didn't want to get a call on Friday saying, guess what, next Tuesday you're going to be moving to Houston, because I wanted stability for my family and stuff like that. And so my notion was that you find a place that you think is good enough to support the things you want to do, and you put some roots down, and then you do everything you can to make that a better place. So you invest in that place and try to make it as good as you can. And I certainly don't take credit for it, but I can tell you that for me right now, well, for me for the whole time I've been here, it's been a wonderful place. And surprisingly, I would say right now, this is the best place that I could possibly imagine to be. Ron Calendar, Jeff Miller, Jeff Green, Fabio Riviera. This is the dream team of Catalysis. This is a world-class catalysis group interested in collaborative research, interested in sharing ideas. It's a fantastic environment. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to still have opportunities like this to talk to you. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that the reason we have this dream team is because they were recruited by our environment. And I need to give that credit because gathering this team, I mean, identifying good people is one thing, getting them to come and join this group, that's another thing. And Arthur gets the credit for that. I got it. Thank you very much. Questions?
Professor Delgass, you spoke a lot about confidence being part of one of the keys of being successful. And I was just wondering, so during your time developing your career, graduate school, doing a postdoc, starting out as a professor, there must have been some times where you had some doubts or felt like you really hit some roadblocks, or maybe you were questioning some of that. I'm just wondering, like, how did you get through all that, and what advice do you have for those of us maybe interested in pursuing a similar path on how to overcome some of those obstacles and gain that confidence?
This is going to sound bad. I'm not sure I remember not being confident. You know, I mean, it sort of depends on your upbringing and all that kind of stuff, and what your past history is. I guess to me, there's always this bit of nervousness when you're going into an important thing and all of that, and the way I handle that is, for whatever the encounter is going to be, whether it's giving an important talk or trying to address a potential collaboration with somebody with deep pockets or something like that, where you think a lot is on the line. My way of doing that is I get as prepared as I know how. And I work at that and I work at that, and then from past experience, what I've learned is if you are so driven by that you worry and worry and worry to the point that you don't sleep the day before and all that kind of stuff, then essentially you push yourself into a realm that makes you less productive. So my solution to that is I go to a certain point, and then I draw a line and say, okay, that's it. The cards are going to fall however they're going to fall. This is the best I can do. I'm going to go out there and strut my stuff, and they're either going to like it or not. And I've had lots of conversations with young assistant professors, and I think that there is an attitude that's very helpful. And that is, you have to remember that what's in front of you and what you've chosen is probably important, because that's why you've chosen it. But it's not the only thing that's out there. Part of this confidence idea is that if I reach for this ring and I miss it, and even if I fall off my horse in the process, I'm confident enough in the fact that I have skills and abilities that somebody's going to want it, that I'll find another oyster line. And so one way to start into an academic career is instead of worrying about all the pressure and who you have to please and all this sort of stuff, you think about what is it that I really want to do? What would make this job my job? And you do that. If they don't like it, screw it. Get on another horse and do something else. You don't want to be stupid. I mean, there are political situations and there are people that you know if you do something in the heat of the moment, you're going to pay for it for the rest of your life. It's smart not to do those things. But it's not smart work on something you're not interested in, or to put yourself in a situation where the things that you care the most about are not the things that you spend your most energy on. And I think that the other part of that, the confidence building part, is to try to put yourself into as knowledgeable a position as you can. And I think what I was talking about before is is really what I was thinking about in anticipation of answering this question, is what can you do as a relatively inexperienced person to compete with people more experienced than you? And the only thing I can think of is you have to broaden your background as much as you can. And that means, you know, often the way these things happen is you as a graduate student, you learn a certain tool set. And the natural thing to do is to say, okay, here's my tool set, I'm going to go use it. I wrote a letter to Jimmy Way when he was director of global research, and I said, I'm the world expert. I did probably say that. I probably said, I know a lot about mass spectroscopy, and I think it's very important, and I want to come and do mass spectroscopy for mobile. And he wrote me back a very short letter that said essentially, be an academic. and the reason is that industry is interested in solving problems, and the solution to the problem is not under the light post. You can't have one light post and sit right there and think that you're going to solve problems. You know, build tools and all of that kind of stuff. So the problem is that you start with your tool set and you think, you know, I'm going to build something around that, and even if you have something innovative that's an application of your skill set to a problem, okay, what you still don't have is how do you know that's the problem worth working on? That's the problem. I mean, everybody comes out with a Ph.D. well-trained to do world-class work. But if you do world-class work on a problem that nobody cares about, its impact is very small. What you want to do is world-class work on a problem that matters. And how do you find those problems? That's the hard thing. You can't get that if you're not broadening your background and trying to get that information. And another part to being successful at these sorts of things is it's all in the details. It's that last little bit. It's the wiggle that doesn't fit. It's the fact that this is the wrong temperature range for this to be happening. Again, it comes back to your instinct and your mosaic. There's something in what you're seeing that isn't quite right. It's solving that part. It's an essential part for everybody else.
If you get a chance to go back in time, what is the first thing that you would like to change?
You know, knowing what I know now and how the system works, I might be tempted to reconsider how I went about choosing my academic position. But, you know, I guess my feeling about this is that in any given decision time, what you do is you do the best you can to make the best decision you can. And that's like what I said. You make that decision, right or wrong. And you draw a line. You say, all right, this is what I'm going to do, and I am going to make the absolute best out of this, even if I end up hating it. I am going to do the best I can at this particular job, because success is going to give me new opportunities. So that's what you do. Make a decision, right or wrong. Ride that decision until some new opportunity or some new possibility or happens, or you get to a point where you say, you know what, I'm spending too high a fraction of my time doing things that I don't want to do. And you start looking for something else. So, I don't know. I mean, looking back over a long career like this, and over a span where I really had an opportunity to do a lot of very good science, and the search for truth and the reward of the beauty of that is very important to me. Balancing that against the rest of the truth set is about life balance. And you know, one of the things that played in my mind when we started having children, there was a song called Cat's Cradle. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that. About the boy that keeps saying, Dad, let's play catch and let's do that, and Dad keeps saying, you know, we'll do it later, and then finally Dad says, hey, let's go do that, and the kid says, Dad, I'll do it. So I said, that is not gonna be me. And I tried really hard. But the lure of science was pretty strong. And you know, part of the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing right now is to change that balance, that whenever there's a decision now about something like this or something exciting like going to Fabio's Heinz Award presentation or something like that, there's something about family that comes before that, and that comes first out. It didn't before. I don't know if I would have changed that very much, because the switch was pretty satisfying, but that's always a problem. That's always, the balance part is always difficult. And it's okay, you know, everybody gets to make his own algorithm. And you know, if you decide that your algorithm is really strong on the science side, and you know, the kids are going to have their own birthdays or whatever else goes along with that, well, then, you know, I know people that have done that, and that works for them, and you know, but you can draw it however you want, and it may be that balance will put some limitations on one side, okay? But it's a total optimization.
So you talked a lot about your passion for truth in terms of science and things like that. How does that play into your desire to mentor others and teach and help others to sort of grow into having the passion that you have?
Well, I would say it this way. When you go to think about